Of the 7 classes in League, I mentioned several times in the past that the 2 most popular in the game were Fighters and Slayers, at least in the realm of solo queue. Assassins, Skirmishers, Juggernauts, and Divers hold the lion's share of the player base for much of the same reasons. They're self-sufficient, have reliable pressure throughout 2 or all 3 parts of the game early, mid, and late, and are the most dangerous to take on in single combat out of any other class. While Assassins and Skirmishers carry a lot of representation, their selfish nature limits them to less access throughout the Rift compared to Fighters, who as of right now are seen across 4 of the 5 roles: top, jungle, mid, and support. The one in particular that occupies them are members of the Diver class, arguably the most frequently played subclass in the entire game. Divers have had a storied history due to their hybridization of 2 very useful functions, one of which has enabled them to just barely overtake their more hypercarry-centric peers. Recent additions to the roster, as well as overhauls to veterans, also blurred the line between said diver and hypercarry, causing it to transform from a group of champions known for starting fights to champions known for ending them as well, which has made them consistently useful in almost every situation. For today's episode of the class discussion series, we're going to be going over divers and why everyone plays them. With how diverse the subclass has gotten, I think it's worthwhile to recap just what exactly divers are meant to be. In layman's terms, you can think of the diver as part Juggernaut, part Vanguard. The Vanguard tank subclass is known for leading the charge in battle, relying on their massive crowd control and engage potential to get the ball rolling. First ones to come to mind would be Malphite, Nautilus, Amumu, Alistar, Zac, those guys. The Juggernaut Fighter subclass is famous for their brute strength, equal parts damage, and durability, a combination that's earned them the moniker of raid boss champions. On a surface level, that seems like a match made in heaven. You get the engage potential of a tank, which is a weak point for Juggernauts, and the battle capabilities of a Juggernaut, which is a weak point for tanks. Naturally, you're not getting the full scope of effectiveness from either, but having even half of the best of both worlds sounds like a pretty sweet deal, and it is. Like Vanguards, divers are usually the first ones into a fight, immediately forcing the enemy team to deal with their presence as they deal sufficiently high enough damage to pose a threat if neglected. While they may not be nearly as face tanky as the classes they derive from, they can still withstand a decent amount of returning fire, especially when itemizing defense. A common theme you'll notice among divers is their front-loaded damage, contrasting from the persistent or back-loaded damage of Juggernauts, meaning if you're being engaged on by a diver and can survive the initial assault, their pressure drops off considerably. That being said, the range of boundaries of the class has loosened over time. Some divers are known for having very consistent damage output all throughout. So long as they're alive, you need to get them off the map as quickly as possible. Because of that, for the sake of this video, I'm going to make 2 subcategories of the diver subcategory. I know it's a bit confusing. The first group consists of battle divers. While they do have engaged potential, it's not nearly as overwhelming or as far-reaching as their peers. But in exchange, they can output easily as much damage as a skirmisher or juggernaut, with a lot of it being burst oriented. The main form of counterplay against this class is to keep your distance and play the neutral game. The majority of battle divers have shorter practical range, therefore kiting or disengaging from them can mitigate a lot of their pressure. Some examples of battle divers are Renekton, Wukong, Olaf, Irelia, and Diana. To repeat, not saying these champions have no engage at all, they can still run down the enemy team if given the chance, but usually their shorter distance coverage or lack of re-engage can be exploited by either poking them down and never letting them get close, or get off me tools like Vayne's Condemn, Janna Monsoon, Alistar Headbutt, what have you. The other subcategory is engage divers, the classic ones. These are your archetypal divers. Long range, good bit of burst damage, but otherwise easy to neutralize, especially when caught by themselves. Doesn't matter how much range you have, these guys can and will get up in your face. So, instead of trying to avoid confrontation, you should focus on defense and survival. Brace yourself essentially. They're gonna find their way smack dab into your team, but there's usually a small grace period between them engaging and their team joining the fight since they engaged so far. If you defuse the situation quickly enough, then you have an easy 5v4 on your hands. Engaged divers comprise Hecarim, Camille, Jarvan IV, Vi, Lee Sin, Mantheon, and Xin Zhao. Although mind your positioning for Lee and Xin Zhao, you don't want to get knocked back towards the enemy team. Of the 2, battle divers have been growing more prominent in this day and age. Following the long-spanning tank meta of seasons 5 through 7 and the subsequent progressive deterioration of our attitude towards teamwork in solo queue, many players have adopted this every man for themselves mentality, incentivizing them to play champions who can fend for themselves in a wide variety of situations. And the classes most suited for that kind of solo 1v9 play are divers, skirmishers, and assassins. As you know though, damage in League power crept drastically over the last 5 years, and while efforts have been made to reel that in, such as a durability update around a year ago, damage is still at an all-time high. Everyone can one-shot everyone unless you're a tank. Skirmishers and assassins are still at large, but divers have exploded in popularity for offering equal, if not a similar amount of DPS, while being ever so slightly tankier to last longer than their competition, and they can do this whenever they want. In a burst-oriented meta, it's kill or be killed. In League, whoever attacks first usually wins. It's incredibly rare for the team being engaged on to win the fight. Vanguard tanks lack the damage to finish their targets, they require the assistance of their team to follow up on that engage. You might get the cleanest 5-man Ornn ultimate, but if your team is a bunch of Papegas, you may as well have missed your ultimate for all it matters. Skirmishers and Juggernauts have more DPS and durability respectively, but they either don't have the ability to get close to the target, or may have a hard time sticking to that target once they do. As a diver, you tend to have enough damage to kill at least one person while having just enough resilience to brawl your way out. Contrasting skirmishers who have situational defensive tools, divers have general defensive tools. For example, Jax's Counter-Strike negates all basic attacks coming his way, but against abilities, he's out of luck, although he does get 25% mitigation against AoE. Gwen's Hollowed Mist is one of the most broken abilities of all time, but only if she's attacking a target who's outside of the mist from within the mist. Yasuo's Windwall screws over projectiles, but nothing else. On the other hand, Irelia's Defiant Dance mitigates all forms of reducible damage for 1.5 seconds and cannot be interrupted in any way. Warwick's Primal Howl is just unconditional damage mitigation for a short duration. Many others simply have steroids or shields for defense. Olaf, Jarvan, Vi, Lee Sin, Diana, etc. get shields. Renekton gets bonus health from his ultimate, Hecarim gets armor and magic resist from his W. Skirmisher defense can potentially achieve more than divers, but that consistency is what makes them more dependable from game to game. Skirmishers also don't really have accessible crowd control. Those who do don't have them on demand right away. Most divers have immediate access to crowd control. Vi's Q and ultimate, Renekton stun, Rek'Sai knockup, Jarvan EQ, Pantheon stun, Camille hookshot, and so on, giving them just enough lockdown to stop their target from getting away. Comparatively, it's somewhat easier to shake off a Fiora or Tryndamere since at the very least you can move and fight back. Those are what makes their offensive game so desirable. They don't need permission or assistance from anyone. If they see someone they want to kill, they can do that, having just enough of a combination of damage, engage, and lockdown, not really lacking in any aspect. This comes at the cost of not excelling in any field, but ultimately the goal of a diver is to lock onto someone on the enemy team and beat their ass. In the late game, if you're an Olaf, Pantheon, Renekton, whoever, and you one-shot the enemy carry,
then you have my permission to die.
I mean, it would be ideal if you can kill more than just one, but as a diver, your life for the enemy carry's life is a worthwhile trade in my book. Chances are the enemy team blew their resources on you, which alleviates the pressure of whatever they've exhausted from your teammates. From a defensive standpoint, since I doubt you'll be the one landing the first strike every single time, the mere fact that you're a diver deters the enemy team from engaging. When you see an isolated Xerath or Jinx, it's a juicy opportunity. You wouldn't feel as enthusiastic about attacking a Darius or Lowy, right? Not without backup. Why is that? Because you know they're gonna be a bitch and a half to kill. Doesn't matter if you're a 6-item Vayne or Yuumi by yourself. It will take time and will be dangerous to confront them by yourself. Divers may not be quite as resilient, but thanks to their penchant for itemizing bruiser items mid-game and their natural durability as covered earlier, they still have that intimidation factor. Enemy champs will be more hesitant to attack you alone, and even if they do, you have time to fight back. Most divers couldn't care less if they're the ones attacking or being attacked. Their engage works all the same. If anything, they'd prefer it as it makes landing their combo on you much easier. Basically, the reason so many players enjoy divers is because they have options. Options leads to increased agency, and increased agency lends itself to better enjoyment. There's always something a diver can do for themselves or the team. If you're ahead, you can steamroll 1v9 the game, exploding everyone left and right. If things get to late game 5v5, you can double as a pseudo frontline, protecting your carries or at the very least, discouraging the enemy frontline from advancing forward. If it's every man for themselves, you can play pseudo assassin and look for targets to one-shot. If it's an early game decided by snowball, divers are one of the best at doing so. The subclass excels in the early to mid game, compromising late game effectiveness. Even so, you can still contribute to your team in some way. Typically, Lee Sin would prefer to end the game before 30 minutes, but if he lands a clean insec, then his poor late game is a moot point. Every diver has that X factor. Renekton can flash one-shot the enemy Vayne, and even if he dies for it, that could be the game-winning trade. Meanwhile, these guys are pretty dangerous in lane or in the jungle, having enough skirmishing power to handle themselves in 1v1, 2v2, or 3v3 scenarios. Now, one thing I feel like isn't given much attention is that divers may be the only class in the game where you can't get enough of them. Every class has a purpose, and each one is as essential as the next. But there's a reason too many cooks spoil the broth. It's unfavorable to have too many of one class on a team, as that leaves all of you vulnerable to the same thing. For instance, Kindred jungle, Tristana mid, and Jinx ADC isn't good when the enemy team has a Malphite, Jax, Yasuo, and or Rammus. Having too many Juggernauts leaves you wide open to being kited for days. Akali top, Kha'Zix jungle, and Qiyana mid may look scary until you realize you have no frontline, no defense, and abysmal teamfight pressure. A team of tanks can CC chain everyone to hell, but you have no damage. A team of divers doesn't sound too bad though, right? Conveniently, the weaknesses of divers can be addressed with more divers. Hypothetically, let's say you're playing J4 and the enemy team has an Alistar, but you also have a Camille top and Irelia mid. Realistically, the Alistar can only stop one person from engaging. If he disrupts the Irelia, then Camille and J4 can run down the rest of the team. Or let's say you're playing Ziggs and trying to poke them down in the neutral game. Satchel Charge is a serviceable get off me tool, but how will it save you from a Wukong, Hecarim, and Vi all at the same time? It can't. Even champions who excel at disengage like Janna don't have the means to save their team from multiple divers, especially those with unstoppable dashes like Vi and Hecarim. Against one diver, easy. 2, maybe doable. 3 or 4, by that point you're out of cooldowns. You can't exhaust all 3 divers, you can't polymorph all 3 divers. At the same time, divers can back each other up in battle. If one's being attacked, the others can counter-engage on the point of contact, while the one being engaged on can buy enough time for that backup. Furthermore, everyone is a threat. In a standard team composition of 2 tanks, 2 carries, and 1 support, by dispatching the 2 carries, the remaining champions are for all intents and purposes a free kill. But even if you catch out the Lee Sin, you still have to deal with the Wukong top, Diana mid, and Pantheon support who all pose a threat to your backline. It's legitimately the only class in the game where having more actually strengthens the team instead of nerfs it. I mean, it makes sense if you think about it. They're basically jack of all trades, masters of none. 80% attack, 80% defense, 80% mobility. But if you put enough divers on one team, eventually they become masters of everything, provided they're, working as a unit to a certain degree. I like to think that divers are the epitome of the SAO abridged meme.
I'm open to suggestions.
Whoa, gosh, we could, group up
And hit it till it dies!
Woo, nice!
Yeah.
High five!
That's a good start, but let's hear some other suggestions.
I'd like to hear more about this final solution.
It, group up.
Overall, divers are reliable. They're the perfect solo queue champions. It's true that they've gotten power crept a ton over the years, but hey, if you can't beat them, then join them. Back in the day, they used to be only known for engage and burst, but over time, adjustments have been made to give them the option to do more than just that. I actually remember a lot of changes. Jarvan's ultimate used to only damage the one you point and clicked on, not everyone in the arena. His W shield used to not have that bonus AD scaling. Wukong was a one and done EQ ultimate champion, but now he can use his ultimate twice and his clone actually attacks. He used to be able to stall out Olaf's ultimate, but now so long as he's attacking something, he can maintain its duration indefinitely. Pantheon went from a cheesy lane bully up top to a genuine fighter. Irelia, Hecarim, Diana, Warwick, Xin Zhao, all of them received some change or another to give them more privileges. To be fair, they've been doing the same to every class, but I feel like divers had it the best in recent times, courtesy of their versatility. And also that versatility allows them to get indirectly buffed a lot. Divers can build tank items, they can build bruiser items, they can even build full damage items. There's been so many iterations of builds on every champion over the years. Take Hecarim, he had full AD Dustblade, he had Divine Sunder, he had Chem Tank, he had everything. Bottom line, they never get old. You can do so much with them, and they're almost never a bad choice regardless of who's on your team and who's on the enemy's. The only downside I can think of is that they have a high chance of disrupting the meta. Whenever one of them is popular, everyone plays them, making it hard to balance them as almost all of them are easy to pick up and learn at a base level. Fortunately, there's always a handful of divers who are good at any given point in time, and I don't recall a single moment where the class as a whole was weak, as opposed to tanks, mages, or marksmen. But that's about all I have to say about the class. Hope you found this insightful. Don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comments down below if you agree or disagree with my points. As always, if you enjoyed the video, it would be great if you left a like and subscribe. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter @Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other class discussion videos if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.